Welcome everybody to our ALASCA Tech-Talks today. This is the last Tech Talk for this year. This is our 21st Tech Talk. My name is Jan and I'm your moderator today. And as always, please note this session will be recorded. So in case you missed this or a friend of yours will be watch this, we upload this video on YouTube so you can watch it later on. And yeah, today is the agenda. We have our tech talk and discussion, and afterwards we share some news and events from the ALASCA Foundation. So stay tuned and be curious. And our today's tech talk is about digital sovereignty. We have our presenters, Anastasia and Marcel from the DISQU company. They have a nice tech talk about how to quantify digital sovereignty, and Anastasia is currently finishing her master thesis in computer science. She worked for 4 years as a student at the Telecom MMS to perform data migrations. And yeah, maybe her plan was to finish the thesis in the end of September this year. Anastasia, maybe you can share some news about this.
Yeah, it's finished, and now I'm working for a Dresden half-time job for a research project, so I'm fine.
Great. And congratulations for
Thanks.
this achievement. And our other presenter is Marcel. He's enthusiastically working with open source and Linux since the age of 12. And he got a diploma in computer science at TU Dresden also. And during his university time, already he's working as a freelancer for network and system operation. So yeah, then let's start with your talk. I'll be curious and the stage will be yours.
Yeah, then, okay, I guess you have to
Stop
give
my
me
share.
rights to share it. Yeah.
So I stop my share, you can start.
So should be working now. You can see the screen or?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yeah, then also welcome from our side to talk about digital sovereignty today. And I guess most people here already heard the term, maybe have some ideas how to gain digital sovereignty. And yeah, if you take on the current situation out there, now with Trump becoming president again, and the probably more self-concentrated aggregation of the United States with many big players coming from the US, more people are thinking about digital sovereignty. And yeah, but if you want to become digital sovereign, you have to know how to measure how successful your journey on that way already was, or how this way could look like. And that's what we talk today about. Yeah, so the topic is not easy because you can find no common sense on definitions for digital sovereignty out there. For example, also those hyperscalers have sometimes together with partners solutions where they are spraying some sugar on the existing solutions. But if you take a detailed look on those solutions, you can see that they're mostly providing data sovereignty to give you control that the data is stored inside the EU or sometimes Germany. But the problem with only getting data sovereignty is that the customers are still dependent on the specialized solutions offered by those cloud providers. And so it's still hard to move to other cloud providers, and you keep your dependency on their solutions. But on the other hand, there are also other actors, for example, like open source organizations as the OSPH, and they have broader definitions on sovereignty with different criteria, which try really to enable the user to be independent. And usually they do this by taking the free selection of used systems or ensure data access to the main focus.
Many companies use public cloud services and external IT solutions to digitalize their system and processes. And this offers them the opportunity to use a variety of different services, and especially for low financial and time invest. And especially the cloud services offers companies a high degree of flexibility and scalability, especially in the beginning of a digitalization journey. But in the long term, the problem is that there are a lot of negative aspects, especially if companies have become dependent on the IT services which they're using. And the main disadvantage is that such a dependency means that when prices increase for subscriptions, the companies are not able to avoid this. And also they don't have nothing to say over the functionalities or the locations of their services which they are using. And to avoid these negative aspects, companies must ensure that their IT infrastructure components are always interchangeable. And in this way, they can maintain their independence and self-determination with regard to their digital systems. And this means that they are digitally sovereign. And this leads us to our definition of digital sovereignty. This is the ability to use and control digital services, data, software, hardware, and processes independently and autonomously. This was the reason why we need digital sovereignty, and now we want to explain why we have to quantify this digital sovereignty. Digital sovereignty can be achieved by gradually reducing digital dependencies and minimizing them as far as possible. And it's necessary in order to avoid vendor lock-in scenarios. Because vendor lock-in scenarios are really bad because the IT infrastructure is so dependent in the situation that the company can't change it because of financial or technical reasons. And in order to gradually reduce these digital dependencies, in every IT decision, the aspect has to be considered. And a comprehensive digital sovereignty strategy is necessary to make this possible. And as an early strategy, the measures here must also be measurable in order to check progress and effectiveness. So we decided to develop a method for quantification of digital sovereignty. Now I will give a short overview about our quantification method. On the left-hand side of the slide, you can see the structure of our quantification method. So there are 4 sub-areas. So first, the data sovereignty. Second, the competencies. Third, the components, which means services, software, and hardware. And the fourth section is the open source. So the portion and also the quality of used open source software. On the right-hand side of the slides, you can see how the quantification is intended to be used. So let's imagine we have infrastructure A, and now we analyze the infrastructure. So it's an infrastructure from a company, for example, and we go through the criteria and of the 4 sub-areas and give points for every criteria. So points from 0 to 5. And in the end, we add up these points to a final score. And this is then the score of the digital sovereignty of infrastructure A. And now let's assume that the company decides to replace some of these components, maybe with better components which are standardized or have better alternatives. So we have another infrastructure B now with other components, and we can do the quantification process again. And now we will get a better score of digital sovereignty, and we can compare infrastructure A and B and see the progress of the digital sovereignty. Now we will dive into the sub-areas in detail. So the first sub-area is the data sovereignty. You see 6 criteria here on the slide. The first one is the location of the data. So it's important to ensure that migration is possible at any time. So the data must be stored in a way that guarantees access and processing at all times. So the storage location must be chosen to protect the data from any kind of access loss. For example, this can include redundant storage or redundant power supply, and as well as physical protection against maybe theft or damage. The second criteria is the encryption of the data. It's kind of similar to the location. So the decryption must be always possible. All keys of encryption must be accessible, and also the encryption software must be available independently of storage media or third parties. The third one is the access control. Data access management must also be available at all times. The fourth point is the ability to export. Here is important that the owner of the data must be always has to be the ability to export the data from a system. And the export data must be also machine readable, so you can put it to another machine and also work with it in another system. The fourth thing is the data deletion. So if data is not longer used, then the company has to be ensured that it's permanently deleted. And this can, for example, achieved through a good self-management or also policies which came into effect after the end of the usage. And the last and biggest point is the data portability. The data should be stored in standardized formats, and everything should be prepared for efficient data migrations. So if the data is in a non-standardized format, an evaluation must be conducted to determine available conversion options, and also the migration software which should be provided and tested, and also the responsibilities should be clear. Additionally, it must be examined which software is compatible with which data formats. It's also an important connection. And the second sub-area are the competencies. And here we have 4 big points. First is the risk awareness. And this means that executives, for example, in the IT department and all other responsible employees have to be, should be know a lot of things. They have to be the answers for the questions. Are they sufficiently trained to recognize the risks of vendor login and take measures against it? Or also to know how the topic of digital sovereignty is addressed in the company and integrated into processes and objectives. The second thing is the knowledge of the employees. Are the relevant employees familiar with the components, dependencies, functionalities, processes, and best practices? And is the knowledge accessible for all people? Is it redundant, stored, documented, and are responsibilities clearly defined? The third thing is the strategy of independence. Here, this is the question for existence and distribution of a strategy to continuously switch IT service providers, and the ability to align technical and organizational decisions consistently with the strategy. And the last thing is the cost management to ensure that cost stability for the IT infrastructure and the strategic analysis of cost trends.
Yeah, now we are going over to the third sub-area, the components. And rating the sovereignty of the use components is the most technical part of the quantification we have. And as most modern IT systems are quite complex, this section was split into the 4 sub-areas: services, which is basically everything you can buy as a service, no matter if this is easy part software as a service or more complex parts like infrastructure as a service. We're also taking a look on the software and hardware you're using and operating on your own. And if you're using cloud infrastructure, we also take a look on the design of your cloud infrastructure you have built. So how did you build it? What's the design of the cloud provider you're using? So how does the selected cloud provider operate, and which parts are available for your use in this cloud environment? In general, for all these components, we are scoring if alternative offers with similar functions and also important cost structures are available. And for the compatible solutions which are out there, we are checking how high the compatibility is, because this directly shows how costly a migration will be. So for example, we have to take a look, are there the APIs for all these services? How are these APIs formed? So have they a common standard to use the same APIs for different providers? Or are the APIs completely different? So you have to rewrite all your automation you have on your side. Same holds for the configuration formats or data formats of software. So if it's the same between two different solutions, it's quite easy to migrate. And the bigger the difference between those formats is, the more expensive a migration would be. And if you're using cloud again, we have to take a look how easy it would be to rebuild your infrastructure with a different cloud provider. And this starts with the availability of different services like VMs, load balancers, or managed Kubernetes, depending on what you're using. And this goes also up to things like standardized VM flavors, because there are many providers out there offering you to run VMs in the cloud. But if they have the same flavor, it's really easy to migrate for you, because you don't have to take care which VM type you want to use with the new provider. But if they have different flavors, you have to consider this also during the migration. And looking on the hardware, it's important how good the replacement parts are available, for example. And this is usually quite easy for generic purpose hardware, because they have plenty of offers out there. But if you have some specialized machines, for example, this also might get hard. So this scoring is done for all the components you have in your infrastructure, but of course they don't have all have the same criticality for the whole system. And that's why we additionally have some kind of weighting for each component you are using. And this is based on the time it's allowable for you that this special system might be unavailable. So here we are also scoring again with 1 to 5 points, where 1 point means that's some kind of nice to have services, which helps you, but it's not important for your application in terms that it's available, or your reputation by your users won't be harmed if this special service fails. An application for such a case might be if you're maintaining or operating some kind of smartphone app, and you want to track how your users are using this. Therefore, you have some kind of analytics service. And if this analytics service, your app still functions, you don't get loss of any reputation, because your users won't notice it. So it's some kind of nice to have feature. If it would be the payment provider of your app, then this would be a really critical part, because your users will notice that it's not working anymore. And also your sales will go down. So this is quite important. There we would score 5 points, because it's not allowable for your service this, for example, this payment provider fails. And then the points 2, 3, and 4 are somewhere between, where it's allowable for some hours, days, or weeks to have a service unavailable. Taking a look again on software, we see that one big chance to gain sovereignty is open source software, as there the source code is available. So you can use this transparency to check what the software is doing. And if you take, again, for example, look on proprietary software, you don't have this possibility. So for example, you have to trust the vendor that your business secrets are not exported. With open source software, there are also no license fees to use the software. So you do not depend on the stable pricing to use the software. With proprietary software, there's always the risk. And from time to time, this happens, that the vendor is increasing the prices significantly if they notice that you and other customers are depending on the software, and there is no real alternative, or it's really expensive to change to another solution. With open source, you don't have this problem. There, the costs usually are coming from maintenance and support. But there you can decide to do this in-house. There you have the full control of costs, or decide to outsource the support for using the software. And there you have the possible selection of many suppliers out on the market. So there's no single vendor you're depending on. You can always choose another vendor. With every software, you have the risk that it won't be developed longer, or the development will move in a direction not fitting your goals. And if you have open source software, this enables you to take part in development and also in discussions about the agenda of the software in future. With proprietary software, you usually don't have those options. Yeah, and due to this importance of open source software for digital sovereignty, we added it to our metrics when quantifying the sovereignty of an infrastructure by counting the relative share of used open source parts and non-open source parts. But next to this, we also have to take into account how healthy the communities of the used open source software is. Because if the community is unhealthy, there's a real risk that nobody will maintain the software in future. And then you also have the same problem like you could have with proprietary software when the vendor stops developing it or increases the prices so that you can't afford it anymore. And for open source software, in the worst case, there's no one, there are no possible replacements also available for this part of software used. And then you would have costly resources to maintain it wholly alone. And so when you're using open source, you want to measure how this can be checked in advance to be safe, to have the software for a long time running. And how to do this check is quite a complex topic, which could be enough for presentations on its own. But luckily, there is already a project by the Linux Foundation, which is called Chaos. And they created some metrics, how you can check open source systems on this. And as we also want to implement some automated check for the community health, we took a look on these metrics and we found them quite good. So now we want to give you a short overview how these metrics developed by Chaos are working. So they split up the topic to 4 areas, which is mainly activity, then also accessibility and collaboration in the project. And the last part is sustainability. For activity, they are checking how active the community is right now. So therefore, you can take a look on the version control system, which is mostly Git, and see how many commits are there made. You can also take a look to the collaboration platforms like GitHub or GitLab and see how many issues are created, how many pull requests are created, if they are getting resolved or merged, how many people are discussing there. So these are all direct signals of activity inside a project. You can also take a look on how often new versions are released. And the quite important part is not only to count how many contributions there are in the project, you should also take a look on how many different people are actively working there. Because if you only have, like in the XKCD, I've placed here one single guy thankfully maintaining this important project, something might happen to this guy, or he might lose interest in maintaining the project, and then all the other projects depending on this have a big problem. So that's something you want to avoid. And the easiest part is to take a look who is participating with code or also in discussions, and to check that it's not a single guy. So the activity part is how is the project right now, but if this is good, you also want to ensure that it's good in future. And therefore, the metrics by Chaos suggest to take a look on the accessibility and collaboration, which is done to ensure a friendly environment inside the community. So is there some kind of support for new contributors to prevent dependencies on single persons? Also, how good is the quality of the documentation? So all this takes part when there are new people interested in maintaining the project, that it's possible for them to join as easy as possible. Also, there's the idea to check code reviews. So are code reviews existing at all? And if yes, how many people are taking part there? How good is the quality of the review? So is it just act, or is there really some discussion going on the code? Because this also shows that people are learning from each other and they are controlling the contributions, which increases their overall code quality. And the last part is then for sustainability. So how is the funding of the project? Again, is it just some kind of hobby project? Or is it backed by some companies, organizations? As those big players usually have more resources in terms of money and time than people doing it as a free time project have. But if there are companies involved, this is also, again, a challenge for the community health, because then you have to check how many of the contributor persons are working for the same company, because if the company is losing interest in the project, it might be the same problem as it would have been only one developer there. And the last part, which is suggested to monitor, is the fluctuation of contributors. So as that's why, because long-time contributors are more familiar with the code. So for them, it's easier to explain things to newcomers, but they also have a better overview of the things which need to be done in the project. And yeah, they are also mostly faster in doing those implementations.
So this was an overview of our theoretical work until now. So we're also planning a few practical stuff, but this is not ready until now. We are the DISQU, and we help companies leverage the positive and innovative opportunities of the digital world without falling into digital dependencies or even suffering the consequences of vendor logins. And to achieve this, we also have to find 3 core services I want to introduce now. So the first one is the initial audit. And we will take a detailed look at the infrastructure and quantify the dependencies it contains. So the outcome of this service, the core service, is a comprehensive report on the strengths and weaknesses of an IT infrastructure, along with a strategy to enhance its digital sovereignty. The second service is the continuous control. So it's kind of digital sovereignty subscription, because we monitor changes in the infrastructure and the resulting dependencies. And we provide an overview of alternatives that offer potential improvements in functionality or costs. And the third and main service is the migration. So when it becomes necessary for a company, we are equipped to carry out the migration based on the findings of the initial audit and guiding companies away from the potential consequences of digital dependencies. So stop talking, start quantifying. Thank you for your attention, and we are open for questions now.
Yeah, thank you, Anastasia and Marcel, for your nice talk. Okay, let's see if there are some questions in the audience. Oh, there are some questions. Can't see your hands. Or maybe you can post it in the chat to ask your question if your micro is not working or can't speak right now. Okay, if there are no questions, maybe I have a question for you. Are you planning to expand your model, and or do you want to adapt it for different scenarios or company sizes?
We have designed the quantification in such a way that it represents as many sectors and company sizes as possible, so without adapting it. And the individual weighting, or this is possible because of the individual weighting of the infrastructure components. So it's possible to quantify every infrastructure with it. And we also have the goal that this formula gives us the opportunity to compare the infrastructure of more than one company, or also between different states of an infrastructure. So this this means that it's not good to adapt the formula or the quantification for every infrastructure. Yes, so the quantification will be always the same and will be always also published if it's ready.
Okay, nice, thank you. Maybe some other questions? Feel free to speak up now. Lea, are you planning to?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not sure how to raise my hand on Zoom.
Okay.
Sorry. But yeah, I was just wondering. I mean, this was all really interesting. Thank you. Just speaking from my perspective, I was wondering if you would also give advice to companies on how to contribute back to an open source community. Because it seemed a bit like, okay, you check if there's this whole community supporting a project, and then it's fine, and then you can take the open source software. Then if at some point there's only one person maintaining it, then you move on to the next community. And I have this ideal that companies also contribute back to communities.
Yeah, I guess that's also an important part for open source, because if no one is providing back, then yeah, open source will slowly go down. Yeah, our vision also is so the Chaos projects right now, it's mostly metrics. They also have some dashboard developed where you can see it, but only visually. And our plan and our vision is to really monitor a big amount of projects to have this then also available. And this so if you're then a company and you're okay, I'm using heavily open source and I want to contribute back, then our goal is that you can take a look on our metrics and you see projects which need some kind of support. And then you see also, okay, they need someone writing documentation. They need someone taking part in really writing source code, for example. So that's, yeah, then the option for companies to see how they could contribute.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, and I have another question. Maybe is there a risk that a company will become dependent on your scoring or on your advice?
No, it's really important for us, so we pay attention to that. Each service module is followed by a product, such as strategy for achieving digital sovereignty or ready-made migration to different infrastructure. And with this product, the company can go to another service provider at any time, or even can carry out the relevant steps itself. So DISQU will only win the customers with an expertise or knowledge and not with a dependency.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And yeah, maybe there are some questions from the audience, or so what maybe comes around with cloud infrastructure or digital infrastructures. There's always these hyperscalers around, and maybe do you think that they are fundamentally bad or generally to be avoided, or yeah?
Yeah, I think it would be too easy to say, yeah, all the hypervisors are totally bad and you have to avoid it by all means.
Hyperscalers, you mean? Sorry.
Hyperscalers. Yeah. Because they have some solutions they can provide based on their size. So if you need something really quick, I think they are good. But you have always to consider what you're building there. So you can build your infrastructure in a way in hyperscalers that enables you to move onward later, or if needed or if wanted. But you could also use the highly specialized solutions there, which then really build up in vendor lock-in. And if you don't use those special services, which enables you to move onward, from our perspective, it's fine to use hyperscalers. So they are not totally black. So it's like everywhere, not black and white. So there's also some gray in between.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Marcel. Any other questions?
We just to follow up on this. I don't quite remember all of your slides, of course, but I mean, yeah, deciding whether or not to use a solution from a hyperscaler, it also depends on how critical the solution is to the functioning of your business, right? And then maybe in some cases, it's not so bad if the solution ceases to exist.
Yeah, that's also why we had this weighting based on time allowed to failure, basically. So if it's not important at all, for example, the example of the analytics for the Android app, so the most used service out there probably is Google Analytics, because Android ecosystem, and if you don't depend on having this available, it might be in your cost structure and with efforts you need, might be a solution to use that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So good that this session will be recorded, so we can just look and then maybe you get some questions afterwards from the audience or from from related persons. So yeah, thank you for the talk, for the interesting talk. I guess we can go on with the news and the events that happened around the Alaska community and the Alaska Foundation. So I get back to my slides here. Okay, so yeah, very good news from the Alaska that it receives the funding from the Saxon State Ministry of Economic Affairs, Labor and Transport, the so-called SMVA, to strengthen digital sovereignty in Saxony. So thanks to this funding, the Alaska will be able to increase the competitiveness of Saxon companies through operational cloud technologies and to reduce the dependence of international providers. So that's what we discussed before. And it's very good that there is this funding and that Alaska can go on with his goals on this very interesting and necessary path. Yeah, and another news is that we have some new job positions that will be advised in the near future on our Alaska website. So please stay tuned if you're interested in. It's on alaska.cloud. And the other news is that in the end of October we had the Alaska Summit, and yeah, it was a great achievement. And here we can say a huge thank to everyone who joined us for the first Alaska Summit. And yeah, all your energy and insights made it unforgettable. So we're truly proud and so grateful to be part of such an amazing community. So this is thanks to the community, and yeah, that this could maybe happen, and maybe there's a great path that we can go on with this. Are there any other news from the community? I see that there are some participants left, so maybe there's some news. So it's not the case. Then, as always, I can say stay tuned. The next Tech Talks and the calendar will be posted on our website. You can subscribe to the email list to make sure you don't miss anything. And yes, you can always watch the past Tech Talks on YouTube. So as I mentioned before, this Tech Talk is being recorded to and posted to YouTube. So stay curious. Our next Tech Talk will be in the end of January next year. We don't have any new speakers right now, but if you're planning to speak here, you can mail us or give us a hint, a note, and then we can see and plan the next talk here. Thank you for joining us, and I wish you a very, very nice Christmas time and Happy New Year. Thank you all for being here, and yeah, see you next time, maybe.